But I have to go. You don't understand. My are counting on me to make it back to Earth in time to from being.
You can't leave yet. I've got and it's my gun.
What if I told you that there were two versions of the early life of one of the most recognizable pieces of animation in the last century? What if I also told you that there was a show that had been so dramatically censored that it actually altered the tone of entire pieces of the work? What if I told you that the American version of Dragon Ball Z was one of the most strange examples of censorship in modern animation? This is the story of how one studio accidentally helped create the very stereotypes its industry was trying to avoid, and how one show's pure quality overcame its own gag order. Dragon Ball Z wasn't just a great piece of entertainment, it was crucial in bringing anime into the mainstream of Western culture, but its journey wasn't easy. See, after attempting to localize the original Dragon Ball series and not finding the audience they were hoping for, Funimation Entertainment decided their efforts were better spent on dubbing Dragon Ball Z from Japanese to English for English-speaking audiences and bringing it over to the West. There was one problem. They partnered with a company called Saban Entertainment to make that happen. And Saban, well, they had some rules in place, and those rules were not going to be changed just for Goku and his friends. Why Saban? Well, there were some perks. For starters, music was a big part of anime at the time, and still is. Saban composed an entirely new score for the American Dragon Ball Z dub, brand new music under the name of Shuki Levi, an alias for the founder of Saban, Haim Saban. With him composing the score, Funimation would maintain control of all music and not have to pay royalty fees to any other composers or artists when the music was used. So Saban saved them some money. Saban also worked with the English actors and actresses for the Dragon Ball dub and would be able to cast them again for the Z dub, saving even more time and energy, even though they'd eventually be replaced early on in the dub's run on TV. But it's hard to imagine that those small pros outweighed the cons that would follow.
I can see their parachutes. They're okay.
Did you catch that? Look, I can see their parachutes. They're okay. Yeah, that line is not in the original version of Dragon Ball Z. It was placed into the American version because apparently American audiences couldn't handle the thought that they might be dead. That is the tiniest tip of the Saban iceberg. Saban's censorship rules were strict, and they were vast. Dragon Ball Z is a show that's about gratuitous violence, growth, action, and more violence. It's a big part of what makes the show special. Americans, however, didn't get that version of the show. Saban's first rule? No death. If a character was to be killed in the original version of the show, in the American version, they had to be sent to the next dimension or another dimension. They weren't dead, they were elsewhere. This became such a foundational rule to Saban that they began removing literal references to death. Early in the show, when Goku is still quote-unquote dead, lines were removed or changed from the Japanese version to ensure references to his death weren't actually references to death at all, and instead, references to his journey to another place in the original Saban dub. But it didn't stop there. There was also the references to more mature matters. Bulma, seen fishing with underwear as bait here, eventually gets replaced in one version of the Western release with this wad of cash? Underwear, any references to the human body in any way, were deemed too mature. Saban would remove or alter any and all references to drinking or smoking in their dub, and this is all important. Smoking, for example, was, and in some places in Japan, still is a massive influence on media and art. Altering things as simple as those references does indeed change the tone of the show and its messaging, but we'll come back to that. I think the best example of Saban's overreaching changes to Dragon Ball Z are in Goku's trip that lands him here.
Hey, where am I?
This is supposed to be hell. In the original Japanese version, it is. That's what these shirts say, and that's where Goku finds himself. The original Saban version deemed almost all of this episode to be unacceptable for Americans. These hilarious shorts are edited to say Heifer, which turns hell into the acronym for Home for Infinite Losers. That's right, Goku has fallen off of Snake Way and into the Home for Infinite Losers. If that wasn't enough, they quite literally changed Goku's appearance. In the original Japanese version, Goku can be seen wearing a halo, indicating his presence in the afterlife. In the dub, he's wearing a ball of light over his head to make sure that no one in the audience thinks of him as passed on. This is in combination with things like not allowing certain characters to actually bleed red blood, and instead giving them colored goo, or moments like these, where the impact and shock value of a violent moment is quickly altered to be much less impactful, because it would be too much for the American youth, apparently. Now you might be thinking, well, why does any of this matter? Is censorship really that big of a deal when it comes to this stuff? Yes, it is.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
See, the unedited versions of Dragon Ball Z would eventually make their way west, and they are phenomenal, and they may even be the versions you saw growing up, or for the first time. But this kind of mass censorship has an impact on the quality and human response to shows like Dragon Ball Z. Character moments change, like this one, where Master Roshi goes from reading a risque magazine to literally nothing. This moment now goes from a humorous moment that cues you in on who he is as a character, as maybe a first-time viewer, to strange, out-of-place moment that seems like a joke but makes little to no sense. Saban's removal of blood and references to death substantially change and alter the tone of the show. The Japanese version can be and is gritty, it's at times raw, and it attempts to imbue the stakes of death into its viewers. The Saban version plays out more like a strange comedy, or even at times a children's show. When Piccolo can't even bleed the same color blood as a Ninja Turtle, and characters are pointing out that the man in the helicopter is, okay sweetie, he's fine, you have qualitatively changed something. But I think the worst part is the attempt to seemingly Americanize something that doesn't need to be. Believe it or not, Western culture, specifically anime watchers, are both smart and mature enough to understand that other cultures do exist. Part of the charm of art is that it offers a lens into cultures that may not be our own. Dragon Ball Z may be just a fun action show, but its depiction of sex, smoking, violence, and the way it's animated are all reflections of the culture within which it was made. When you alter that version, especially the nuances of it like the Saban version did, you lose almost all of that. Dragon Ball Z was, and in some ways still is, one of the most important pieces of animation to ever hit the West. From top to bottom, the show is fun, brutal, hilarious, and full of heart, and yet to this day, anime is still treated like a niche product of another culture that can't stack up to American and Western animation. It's treated by some in the West as vapid, empty, action-oriented animation that's geared towards teens who simply want to shut their brains off. And yet, when you pander to an audience, when you change the vision of artists because you believe your audience isn't mature enough to handle the content, you are essentially feeding those very generalizations. And we see it in localization and dubbing all the time, and not just anime, but gaming and film. This is a constant struggle in media. And Dragon Ball Z ended up making it out okay. That original Saban version is still the phenomenal show that brought the show its Western popularity, but I think it's a good jumping off point for a simple message. Leave art alone. Games, television, film, don't touch it. Trust your audience. Trust the maturity and intellect of that audience. Don't wash out the nuance of works just because you can. We're always taught growing up to be who we are, unabashedly and proudly. So why don't we treat animation and art the same way? Thank you for watching today's episode of Nerdstalgic. I want to give a quick shout out to Dorkly, who 4 years ago put this idea into my mind well before I started YouTube, and it just kind of never went away. If you enjoyed this video, press the like button. If you want to see more stuff like Dragon Ball Z on this channel, definitely hit that like button so that I know. And if you want to see more content on this channel, press subscribe. That way you won't miss any uploads, and press the little bell next to it. That way you're actually notified when I upload content onto this channel. It's a big help for both me and you. So hit subscribe and that little bell. And on your screen right now, as always, are 2 more episodes of Nerdstalgia. You can click on either of those to see more from me and this channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.